Hello, I'm David Hunt and welcome to The Art Hunter. My guest today is a visual artist, sculptor, but not what you imagine. Can't wait to talk to him to find out how he does it. It's so amazing. Working in a range of contemporary materials, yep, there's no denying that, including flocking. What the hell is that all about? But you might see it over my shoulder. Solo and group exhibitions, multiple group exhibitions, with pieces that are very different, and like listing and like taking you on a journey with these pieces. I find it all a little bit mystical, but a lot of fun and being very cheeky. He's been in, shortlisted for many prizes along the way, both here in Melbourne and in Sydney. Brad Gunn, sculptor extraordinaire, welcome.
Thank you, nice to be here.
So where did it all start for you? Were you a kid building, little mud houses and stuff as a kid, or?
I was not. I started out drawing, and I sort of had plans, I guess, to be a comic book artist when I was first kind of starting out, because I just really love drawing. And then...
Do you keep on, are you doing any of that nowadays?
No, I lost the ability to draw pretty much.
Oh.
And I look back at some of my early work and I was pretty good back in the day, and then now I just kind of can't do it anymore.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Isn't that interesting? But then when you think about it, your forms that you create are a bit comic book, aren't they?
Absolutely. It all sort of derived from that. It sort of taught me how to draw, they taught me how to read. It taught me sort of how to tell stories. So I'm a big sort of advocate for them.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happened during school life and when you left school?
So I was sort of a little bit unsure about what I wanted to do, and I was in a graphic design course. And one of the projects was to create your own toy. And do all the packaging and everything for it. And so that was my first time sculpting, and I just sculpted one of the characters that I was drawing. Really loved it, was pretty good at it. And then from then on, just kind of fell in love with it and kept going.
Right, okay. And did you go and study?
I did. I was at the VCA to get my bachelor's degree.
Right, in what?
I finished in sculpture and spatial practice.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So what path did that take you, though? It wouldn't be what you're creating now, though, would it?
Well, it was similar. I was kind of making similar work back then, but it was probably a bit more experimental. A lot of installations and things like that. After uni, I went to Berlin for a couple of years to try and be an artist, and then that was kind of a bust because all I did was end up partying.
Well, it is Berlin.
It is Berlin.
Is it as good as they say it is?
Yes, it is. It's a great place to be if you are creative and there's a lot going on, but I just I wasn't really in the mood, I think. I just wanted to have a good time after studying for so long. But I kept going around telling people that I was a sculptor without actually ever sculpting anything. So I decided that I had to go home and basically pull my finger out and, do something.
So when you came home, what was your first thoughts? Had you had some of these images in your head by that stage?
Well, it sort of evolved. I generally kind of create pieces based around a general theme for a solo show, and each piece stems from that idea, that singular idea.
Right.
But a lot of it is just, I would sketch out ideas, but generally these days the work comes from when I'm actually doing and sitting there and sculpting with the clay.
But where does the idea come from, Brad? Because it's your mind is, as I said, it's a bit comic book in a way, but they're characters that you don't. I haven't seen them before.
I think it's all just kind of a mixed mash of sort of that sort of fantasy comic book sort of stuff with more serious themes that I think about the world and identity and things like that. And so I kind of try to mix the two together.
So they're a bit monstery, but they're playful monsters, aren't they, a lot of them?
Yeah. I kind of like to teeter on the edge of something being a little strange without it sort of leaning too far into it being either a scary thing or a monstrous thing, and have it be kind of somewhere in the middle, somewhere more ambiguous. I think if I can nail that, then I'm kind of successful.
Yep. Tell us about the flocking, because that features heavily now in what you do. Where did you find out about it, or were you seeing other? Because I don't know anyone else that really does that.
There's a few other artists that do it. I did it years ago for a solo show at Brunswick Street Gallery. I had these lion heads, and I did. It was a kind of a wall piece that I had done, and I was sort of experimenting with the medium, and it was okay, but now it's sort of developed and it's a lot more professional. But it's been going on for about 15 years now.
Okay, so explain to our audience, and to me, more to the point, how do you apply it? So you make the object, and what's it made of to begin with before you start putting all the flocking on?
So the process is really long, sort of a 4-part process.
I could imagine.
So you have, I start with a clay sculpture. And
it's clay, right?
Yeah, well, so initially it's like an oil clay.
Right.
Which is basically like a clay that never dries out. So you can keep working on it for as long as you want.
Yep.
And then I will make a silicon fiberglass mold from that.
Right.
And then I will cast different products into it, like resin or concrete or something like that.
Yep.
Then when that is finished, I will spray on the flocking.
So how long would one of the pieces take, like from that clay image to the final flock?
At least a month.
Right, okay.
Yeah, at least. It depends on how long I want to play around with the initial sculpture to get it right. But the mold making process can take up to a week, because you have to do sort of 2-part molds or 3-part molds, and each part of the mold has to take a day to dry. So that can be quite messy. And then the casting process is also pretty problematic, because you've got to get all the bubbles out. So you have to have sort of degassing machines and pressure pots and things like that. So it's a lot of equipment involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And expensive, all this equipment.
It's very expensive.
So, it's, and I find that with sculptors that it's very expensive what you do, and the process, where, if you're a painter, you just slap it on a canvas. It's a lot different.
I wish I had been a painter. I say that all the time, especially when I have to move studios and I just have all these sculptures and molds and original pieces just kind of lying around. You've got all the different parts of the process which you have to move, and I just kind of dread those days.
And talking to you mentioned moving around. What, you have to move on at times, because do you work out of a warehouse?
Yeah, so I'm in a sort of a shared working space with other artists at the moment, which is a warehouse.
Yep.
But I don't generally move often. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of spaces that like sculptors, because we sometimes make noise and we use chemicals and things like that.
Yep.
So you have to find spaces which are appropriate. And have enough space. So it can be really tricky. So I generally don't move around often.
Yeah, but like the thing is, buildings get sold, they get pulled down.
Absolutely,
And are you being pushed further out of town because of that?
Yeah, totally. So where I am is, it's the warehouse district of Brunswick, and a lot of those just getting knocked down now. And apartments going up.
Yeah. So it must be tough, in that respect, thinking to yourself, they're going to tap us on the shoulder and say, sorry guys, you're out.
Yeah, I think I'll just move further and further out, I think, as I move on.
Yeah. Now, there's one piece, and it's up behind me, it's extraordinary. It's the flocking, but then there's, it's a gold figure underneath, as if it's a cape over the top of a piece. Stunning. Where did that idea come from? Because I'm not seeing anyone really do that.
Well, I kind of grew up with a lot of religious paraphernalia in my home, a lot of Mary statues and the Pieta and things like that. My parents were very Catholic. So I think I just absorbed that through osmosis, and I'd never really attempted to sculpt Renaissance or material or things like that. So I really wanted to, and it was a real challenge for me. It was the first time I'd ever really sculpted anything like it. But I like the idea that you have something quite hard looking, and then you have this sort of soft velvet surface on it, and you have that kind of nice contrast.
Yeah, but then it's not though, is it? Because if you touch it, it's not soft, is it? But it looks
Well,
like the
no.
fabric.
Yes.
The fabric would be, like you could move the fabric around, but it's not.
Yes. A lot of people, when they came to the solo show, thought that I had just draped fabric over the pieces, which was a huge compliment because, I basically wanted that idea.
How hard was it to actually get the right, like movement of the fabric that it looked as if it was fabric just falling?
It was pretty tricky. I initially had a mannequin and I draped some material over it so that I could, use it as reference.
Yep.
But what I found is that because the pieces are scaled down, so they're about 50 centimeters usually, I couldn't get the right movement happening with a life-size model, so I just created it myself, and all of it's basically just made up. I just kind of know when something looks wrong, and then I just keep working until it looks right.
But there's the flocking, and then there's parts of the body that are the sculpture that is a gold.
Yeah.
What's that?
So that's paint.
Oh, is it just painted?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I initially wanted to cast them in brass, but it's incredibly difficult to find a foundry that casts brass.
And wouldn't it cost you a lot of money as well?
It would cost a lot. I can do bronze, but apparently with brass, what happens is there's an enormous amount of shrinkage, and so a lot of foundries don't like doing it because there's all these issues with it, which I didn't really understand because there's so many brass products around everywhere. So I was like, I don't understand why I can't find one. But I can't do that part of the process. I use foundries for bronze and things like that. But it is a huge expense. And I'm a control freak and I really like to do everything myself.
Yeah. So
I kind of mimic the look.
Well, I was going to actually ask you that, like having to pass it on to somebody else to do that. The look, and you explain then that you don't like it. So tell us that process. Do you paint the leg or the arm or whatever sticking out, and then flock it, or
Sometimes it's sometimes you mask it off and then you do the flocking part, and then sometimes you do the paint part second. But sometimes if you do, you have to mask it off with like masking tape basically, and if you go over that on some of the paint and then you peel it off later, it will leave a mark.
Yep.
Yeah.
How frustrating is that?
Really frustrating.
Yeah, because like you put so much time and effort in, and then you go, bloody hell.
Yeah.
Do you have to throw that away, or can you?
No, you have to fix it up. But it's like doing something twice. Nobody wants to do something twice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so are they more time? Like spending more time on them than like some of your monsters?
Well, the monsters in the back are kind of a lot bigger, so they took a lot longer, to be honest. The scale of my work has just sort of increased in the last couple of years.
Right. Why?
Because everyone said go bigger. Everyone said go bigger, and I was like, that's fine, but also there's a whole host of issues when you go bigger, logistical problems, expense issues.
Transporting it,
and it just becomes. It's great because it has more of an impact, but everything just gets trickier. Like the molds get a lot trickier, for instance.
Yep.
Casting gets trickier. It breaks your back more. That kind of thing. Yeah.
But also the fact is, transporting it is a problem. But a lot of people wouldn't have the space. Who is your buyer for them? Are they? Before we move on with that question, do you call them monsters, or is it just me calling them monsters? What do you call them?
I call them creatures, I suppose.
Creatures, okay.
But
have they all got a name?
Yeah, they've all got names. I tried to give them sort of adorable, cute names that were about something. So this show, the one you're talking about, was using these sorts of characters to talk about adult issues. So each one is about a different adult issues. And so I like that kind of juxtaposition of using sort of cute characters with those ideas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now back to that question about who is the buyer of, because I could imagine in a foyer of a huge building, and you walk in and there's one of those monsters or a couple of them standing there together, how awesome would that be?
Yeah, it'd be great.
You know, like, how are you making any inroads there? Have you got an agent to help you?
I sell through about 4 different galleries at the moment. So they've been really great, and they have collectors who buy my work. They generally don't tell me who they are.
Oh.
Sometimes they do. I spoke to a gallery just today, and they said that a guy who was a property developer was buying lots of my work.
For foyers?
For houses that he's selling.
Ah.
And sometimes, I think he bought some of my work for his own home, but
Yeah.
generally it is people who have a lot of real estate, like physical real estate, because sculpture does tend to take up a lot.
Yep.
And you know, it's not everybody, especially in Melbourne, sort of apartment living, a lot of people don't have the room for sculptures.
Yep.
And now that the size of the work has increased, I sort of have to find people who have more real estate.
And are you finding people? Is it working?
Yeah.
The size thing is working for you?
So the big purple one in the background is the hardest sell at the moment. I know it'll sell eventually, but it's long, so it takes up a lot of space that way, and it's the biggest. So I don't actually know where somebody would put it in their home unless they built their own plinth for it.
Yep.
But I just decided to make it anyway. Sometimes I don't want to have to think about the end goal.
Yeah, and that's a true artist, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't be thinking on those lines, but then you're stuck with it and you go, bloody hell,
Well,
what am I
that's
going to
it.
do with it? NGV, they've got to buy one. Is there any
Hopefully.
interest yet from them?
I haven't spoken to them, no. But hopefully one year I'll get in there.
How will you do it through an agent or will you do it yourself?
I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't know the process of contacting them.
Or would you like somebody like the art hunter who knows the director of the NGV
Absolutely.
to send him some of the images and
It's
go,
all about
hey,
word of mouth.
why haven't you got this?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about my career trajectory is basically just trying to get into as many spaces as possible. And that's been kicking off the last few years, obviously pre-COVID and post-COVID, but the more spaces that I can get into, the better, and the more word of mouth is, that's what I need.
Exhibitions. You were mentioning that you did a few solo exhibitions last year, and you've now been in a few group ones.
Yeah.
This year, the purple one is it still on the one?
No, I just took it down last week.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what do you prefer? Your own?
I prefer. I do like solo shows, but they're stressful, and you are the center of attention, which is never my thing.
Oh, you're a shy boy.
Yeah, I don't really love it. I don't really love standing there with my work, talking about my work when people have all these questions.
But isn't that part of it though? Like you have to sell yourself.
Yes.
And more so, well, I think Andy Warhol was the worst one in that respect because he was out there selling himself so much that he's made it harder now for the artists beyond that time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're particularly prone. I don't think we gravitate towards selling ourselves because we are spending so much time alone in the studio. So that's where we're most comfortable, and I think that's almost why we chose the life, because it's solitary and nice.
But don't you want to sell it though? Like, don't you want to explain to a buyer and how much of you've put into this?
Sometimes, and I am getting better at it. But I do like the work to speak for itself generally, and I like to get, the person's own interpretation of the work.
Well, of course, that's important.
Which is why you try to keep the work ambiguous, I think.
Yeah. But I'm just going to go back on something you mentioned earlier, which I was really quite surprised that your agents often don't tell you who bought it.
Oh, they
I don't like
sometimes
that.
do. I think there's a bit of a strange relationship that you have with galleries because obviously they have to make money and they want to make you money, but
I think I know where this is going. Go on.
so there has to be this sort of professional barrier, I suppose, where they liaise with the customer and they're doing that work for you, and and some people will contact you directly, and you basically, I mean, if you have that work in the gallery, you have to speak to the gallery and buy through them.
Yep.
And I think that's completely fair.
Sure.
And I sort of, when I was first starting out, it was a hard sort of thing to sort of wrap your head around the vagaries of those sorts of conversations. But, I want everybody to be doing well, and I certainly want there to be as many galleries as possible because that's good for everybody.
Yep.
So I want everybody to make money, including myself.
But I would love to know who bought it and where they've put it.
I sometimes do. Generally, if somebody says they've got a collector and they just buy through galleries, they'll tell you who they are. They'll tell you what other types of work they've bought, which is great because you get to see sort of where you're at professionally and who's interested in your work and the other types of work that they're interested in.
Yeah. Has there been a time when you've actually seen a photo or seen it in the flesh and you go, oh my God, I can't believe it's in such a bad place?
Not yet. I do. If people buy directly from me, I ask them to send me photos in situ because I love to see where they end up. But I haven't seen any that I've been disappointed in, I don't think. Maybe, I can't remember. Yeah.
So down the track, what do you want to achieve? World domination, of course.
I guess I'd probably like to go international at some point, and I have plans to sort of go to the States and sort of feel that out.
Oh, I think they'd love your work.
Yeah. So I know a couple of artists over in LA that I want to have a chat to and get them to sort of introduce me to some galleries that I like that they show in and see if I can sort of make some inroads.
Yeah, but wouldn't social media, especially Instagram, because that's the one all the artists use, is that having people finding you and approaching you through Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram's been fantastic. I was really hesitant years ago when it first started because I didn't know what it was, but I found that I think it's the best social media for artists because it is just images and videos. And it's been a great way to connect with galleries. And you have this kind of instant portfolio of your work, which is free and a lot quicker to bring up on your phone than any other kind of website or anything like that. And then generally everybody has it, so it's great.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a bit of time and effort you've got to put into it though, don't you?
True. I mean, everything's moved to video format now, which is actually good for me because sculpture works better in videos. I can get a sort of a 360 view of things. But that takes time and effort, and I'm sort of learning, the best ways to video things, and that's a whole other side of it, which is fun, but
But Brad, that's the really interesting thing about the world at present. You have to do it all. I've come across other artists and they go, oh, I've hardly got anything on Instagram. I go, what? Why? What are you doing? Why aren't you, getting the word out there? And, because otherwise the stuff will just sit in your warehouse or in your closet at home.
Fortunately, I was lucky enough to have a friend who taught me all the skills of Photoshop. So I can take great photos with a proper camera and do all the sort of post work on it, which has been absolutely handy. I recommend that to everybody.
But also, you were studying it a little bit at uni, weren't you?
Yeah, we did a bit of photography. I think it's really important to have those skills on the back end of like making your work.
So overseas, America, I get it. What about interstate?
So I'm sort of speaking to some galleries up in Sydney. I have had work up there previously. It's been a bit of an issue, which I'm sort of working out on how to get stuff there safely. I've had some pieces damaged and so I have to sort of weigh up the cost, because also the cost is prohibitive if the works weigh a lot and if they're quite sizable.
Are they heavy? Like the purple one, for instance?
Some of them are pretty heavy, So they range from about 5 to 10 to 15 kilos. And they can be quite large when you package it all up and everything. So you sort of have to weigh up the cost.
And how heartbreaking would it be for you
It's pretty heartbreaking.
if something gets broken?
It's frustrating. I mean, I have molds, so I can make other pieces from those molds, but
But you've got to start all over again.
yeah, and then you got to go through insurance costs and everything. So it's, you know, I had a piece up in the North Sydney Art Prize, and they lost the piece. And
What do you mean they lost it? How did they lose?
They just didn't have it, and then it wasn't actually there for the judging of the piece for the show, and so then they eventually found it a week later, and they put it in the show for the rest of the time it was on. But just all that sort of stuff where it's out of your hands, it's interstate, you can't just go up there and sort it out.
Yep.
All of that can be really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, overseas would be more so, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and especially because sculpture is just, it's at greater risk of being damaged.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would you think about maybe, you know, like going to live in America for a little while and working out of America?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing a stint there.
Yeah. Which would be perfect. You know, like, and you know, how important is it, you know, to see what's happening around the world for an artist?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think we can get stuck living in our bubbles, and I think I do think you have to sort of, like with Instagram, I think you can have so much reference material and influence from it, but sometimes you can have too much. Whereas I like to sort of just have the right amount. Yeah, I don't want to see too much and get too influenced by things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But chatting to an artist, because I find it all the time, getting an artist slant on their work or other people's work is important to me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I definitely like to see what sort of inspires people.
Yeah. And do you go to galleries and see what's happening with other people?
Yep, all the time.
Yeah. Which is a fun thing to do, isn't it? You know, the gallery
better to
world.
see it in the flesh. It's always better to see it in the flesh.
Yeah. You know, like, because online or Instagram, it's not the same. Although taking a 3D photo changes the perspective of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's why I've been pretty lucky, I think.
Yeah. So is there one goal that you've got that you would like to achieve?
Not really. I just always wanted to be a working artist, which is what I get to do. And if I can keep that ball rolling, then I'd be happy. Yeah. I mean, I sort of don't have big plans to sort of world domination. But, you know, if I can continue to make my ideas, that's an incredibly privileged position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about changing direction? Have you thought of that? Is there something that you think, maybe into it, or are you just having so much fun with what you're doing right now?
Every show that I do is a different idea and a different sort of aesthetic. So the last two shows have been completely different. I don't know what the next series is going to be. I'm going to continue making work from the last show around that theme, and from the show before that as well. But aside from that, I don't know what the next step is.
But it'll come though, won't it?
Yeah, it will come. And I don't really want to force it. I think I just want to, I generally allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations on what you're doing. I've wanted to do this interview with you for a while, but you've been a busy boy, which is good.
Yeah.
Good for an artist to be busy. I love what you're doing, the fun, and how exciting what you're creating. I think it's really excellent.
Thank you.
Brad, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. You've been watching The Art Hunter. I'm David Hunt, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.